Hello, radiant Leo soul, and welcome to Eternal Mindfulness. Have you ever felt like the person closest to you might actually be the one silently wishing for your downfall? If that question hits a little too close to home, then trust me, you're not here by accident. This is not just another horoscope video. It's a spiritual transmission. A karmic checkpoint. A moment that the universe has been aligning, just to get your attention. Between May 24th and 26th, powerful energetic forces are moving through your life. The moon in Scorpio is stirring your intuition, bringing chills, gut feelings, and subtle warnings that something isn't quite right. And with Mercury conjunct Uranus in Taurus, hidden truths and long-buried feelings are bubbling up. What was once covered is now being revealed, often in ways that shock you into clarity. That's why this reading is here. Because Leo, your energy is magnetic. Your presence lights up rooms. And yet, that very light can attract shadows. Someone near you, maybe even someone you love, may not be who they seem. They could be smiling, praising you, saying all the right things. But behind those words is a quiet resentment. A hidden envy. An energy that drains you instead of uplifts you. And the most unsettling part? Your soul already knows. You felt it. In the tension of their compliments. In the unease after a conversation. In the way your joy feels smaller around them. So let me ask you. What brought you here, right now, to this video? Was it a lingering sense of unease? A repeated dream? That feeling that you're giving too much and receiving too little, not just in love, but in loyalty? This isn't just a reading. It's a reclamation of your energy, your intuition, your power to walk away from anything, or anyone, that no longer aligns with your soul. And before we go any further, let me take a moment to express the deepest gratitude for your presence here. Every like, every comment, every moment you share this message, every time you subscribe to Eternal Mindfulness, you bring this soul-centered community deeper into its purpose. You allow us to continue offering spiritual guidance and healing clarity to those who need it most. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. But I promise you, dear Leo, this is only the beginning. What the universe is about to reveal in this reading may challenge your view of someone close to you. It may confirm what your spirit has been whispering all along. But most of all, it will empower you to take your light back and protect it, before it's too late. So take a deep breath. Settle into your center. And tell me in the comments, my loyal Leos. What brought you here today? What did your soul feel, that your mind couldn't explain? Because if you're still watching, then yes, your energy is shifting. Yes, your guides are speaking. And yes, you were meant to hear this. Let's begin. When you begin to shine more brightly, when your voice steadies and your presence becomes unwavering, not everyone will know how to receive that. Some will celebrate you, yes, absolutely. But others, often those you once held close, may grow quiet. They may offer praise that feels more like pressure, compliments that twist just slightly in your gut. And you feel it, even if you don't want to admit it. The smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. The way they change the subject when you speak of your joy. The sudden stillness in their support. This is not because you've done something wrong. It's because your light, natural, steady, hard-won, illuminates not only your path, but also their shadows. And that can be uncomfortable for those who haven't yet turned to face their own. The energy in these days is especially sensitive to this kind of subtle shift. With the moon traveling through Scorpio, there's a pulling back of veils. Truths are being felt before they're fully seen. And for Leo, whose spirit is ruled by the sun itself, the contrast between your radiance and another's hidden discomfort becomes impossible to ignore. The cards in this reading, the Sun and the Seven of Swords, tell a powerful story. The sun shines without apology. It nourishes, warms, and reveals. But the Seven of Swords is a quiet thief, sneaking through the shadows with stolen thoughts, withheld honesty, or silent resentment. In this context, it speaks not just of deception, but of how people can silently withdraw their energy while pretending to support you. This isn't always intentional malice. Sometimes, it's their own inner turbulence responding to your clarity. You are the mirror they're not ready to look into. But here's what matters most. You are not responsible for dimming your light just because someone else hasn't yet found their own. It's easy to believe that we must shrink to fit the comfort of others. That if we make ourselves a little less radiant, a little quieter, a little more adaptable, we'll maintain harmony. But harmony built on hiding is not harmony at all, it's suppression. And the longer we silence ourselves for someone else's ease, the further we stray from our center. True compassion is not sacrificing your truth. It's standing in your truth so steadily, so gracefully, that it becomes a lighthouse, not a torch that must be passed or extinguished to keep peace. There's a teaching, silent, old, and often misunderstood, that reminds us, when one truly knows themselves, they no longer need to be accepted by others. The approval fades in importance. The comparisons dissolve. What remains is presence. The kind of presence that doesn't beg for space but becomes space itself. That's what your soul is inviting now. When someone resists your light, it says more about their pain than your worth. But when you begin to shrink in response to that resistance, it speaks to your readiness to heal. You are not here to be palatable. You are not here to be manageable. You are here to be whole. So when you sense that someone's admiration has soured, when support begins to feel conditional or passive-aggressive, you do not owe them an explanation. What you owe is to yourself, to your peace, to your steady flame that doesn't flicker in the wind of someone else's storm. Your light may be a disruption, but that doesn't make it wrong. In fact, it might mean you're finally becoming who you were meant to be all along. Let them look away. Let them misunderstand. Let them shift in discomfort. But don't stop shining. Forgiveness is often painted as the highest form of spiritual grace, a noble act of compassion that elevates the heart beyond pain. But there are moments, quiet, unspoken, deeply personal, when what we call forgiveness is not grace at all. It's avoidance. It's fear. It's a habit of self-abandonment dressed in spiritual vocabulary. When you forgive someone who has wounded you repeatedly, not because they've truly changed but because you fear the emptiness that might follow their absence, what you're really doing is betraying the part of yourself that still hurts. And every time you offer a new chance to someone who never earned back your trust, you're sending a subtle signal inward, that your peace is negotiable, that your worth is second to the comfort of familiarity. The current astrological tension, with the Sun in Gemini squaring Saturn, asks you to confront exactly this kind of karmic entanglement. It challenges your boundaries. Not the ones you speak aloud, but the ones you practice. This is the cosmic test of whether you truly believe that love should never cost you your dignity. Because when boundaries are unclear, the universe doesn't just watch, it intervenes. And often, it teaches through loss what you were unwilling to learn through choice. This square between the Sun and Saturn isn't gentle. It exposes where your need for connection has outweighed your sense of inner safety. It lights up the places where you've said yes, when your whole body whispered no, and it pushes you, lovingly but firmly, to draw the line that only you can draw, between forgiveness that heals and forgiveness that binds. There's an old principle, rarely spoken plainly, but always present in deep introspective practice. What you cling to out of fear becomes the very thing that chains you. We stay in dynamics that deplete us because we've invested so much in them: time, belief, memories, identity. We convince ourselves that leaving would waste everything we've poured in. But staying when love has become a negotiation, when trust has turned to tightrope walking, is what truly wastes you. Ask yourself now, are you forgiving because your heart is open, or because your courage is tired? Are you still giving because love is flowing, or because guilt and history are louder than your instincts? Not everyone who once held your hand was meant to hold your future. Some were only meant to walk with you until you learned to stand still in your own truth. Holding on doesn't always mean strength. And letting go doesn't always mean loss. Sometimes, letting go is the act of deepest respect you can offer your soul, the acknowledgement that your light doesn't belong in places where it's only seen when it dims. You're not unkind for choosing yourself. You're not selfish for no longer offering your vulnerability to someone who mishandled it. You are honest. And honesty, in its purest form, is a sacred act of liberation. When you forgive too soon, especially out of fear, you risk repeating patterns that have already shown their consequences. The past doesn't disappear just because we wish it did. It dissipates only when we process it, when we feel its weight without justifying it, and when we choose, finally, not to recreate it. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to outgrow a bond. You are allowed to love someone deeply and still walk away because staying would mean abandoning the part of you that's finally waking up. This is not the death of compassion. It is the birth of clarity. And clarity, even when it stings, always sets you free. Sometimes, the most powerful act of healing isn't loud. It's not a grand confrontation, not a final word, not even a tearful goodbye. Sometimes, healing is a quiet refusal to keep participating in your own erosion. You realize that peace isn't found in fixing what's broken in someone else. It's found in choosing what keeps you whole. And that choice, when made from a place of awareness and not anger, becomes your true moment of freedom. There's a common belief that in order to walk away, you owe the other person clarity, closure, or one last explanation. But the deeper truth is, when someone has already shown you who they are, especially through repeated disregard, manipulation, or emotional distance, you don't owe them another version of yourself to dissect. You owe yourself protection. The kind of protection that comes not from a wall, but from a gentle but unshakable inner boundary, this far, and no further. The energies during this window, amplified by the symbolism of the numbers 9, 1, and 22, invite you to step into that choice with intention. 9 marks an ending, not in bitterness, but in finality. 1 brings the seed of renewal, the beginning that comes after you've dared to close the wrong door. And 22? That's the master builder. The invitation to redesign your path with wisdom, structure, and a conscious heart. These 3 days are not just dates on a calendar. They are thresholds. A time when the universe stands quietly beside you, waiting to see if you will honor your own evolution by not dragging the past along behind you. You might be tempted to hold on just a little longer. To wait for an apology that feels real. To hope that they finally understand what they did, how deeply they hurt you, how hard you tried. But here's what most don't realize. Needing an apology to move on is still giving your power away. When someone has not demonstrated change through consistent action, their words are not redemption, they're delay. You don't need closure from someone who was careless with your openness. You need courage. And you already have that, even if it's been buried beneath disappointment or grief. This is the moment to reclaim it. Not by hardening, but by choosing wisely where your energy goes next. Think of your energy like water. If you keep pouring it into a cracked cup, no matter how beautiful that cup once was, you'll always feel empty. But if you pour that same energy back into yourself, into your sleep, your food, your creativity, your breath, you'll begin to feel full in places that once echoed with ache. There's a quiet practice you can do now. Sit with yourself and write down every relationship, past or present, that makes you feel small, doubted, tense, or unseen. You don't have to judge them. You just need to notice. And then, without drama or force, pick one person. Just one. And say, even if only in your own heart, I release the need to fix this. I release the guilt that kept me here. I no longer feed what keeps me fractured. This is not withdrawal. It's wisdom. It's choosing to plant yourself where you can thrive. And if someone cannot meet you there, if they cannot water you without also wounding you, then it is not cruel to walk away, it is kind. To yourself. To your future. Sometimes, letting go is not about detachment. It's about realignment. It's realizing that love, to be love, must include you too. Not just your giving, your understanding, your endurance, but your safety, your space, your becoming. And if no one told you this before, you don't need to be broken in order to be loved. You don't need to stay where your soul shrinks just because you're afraid of what happens after goodbye. You don't owe anyone your light if they've only ever used it to keep you in their shadow. You just need one honest, unwavering decision. I choose not to keep nurturing what is harming me. That choice alone is holy. Choosing yourself is not a selfish act, it's a sacred return. In moments when your energy feels thin, when your breath feels shallow, when the weight of trying to be understood becomes heavier than your natural joy, that is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that something within you is knocking gently, asking for space to breathe. And that's what self-protection truly is. Not a wall, not resistance, not isolation, but the simple honoring of your own threshold. There's a quiet wisdom in learning to tell the difference between what nurtures you and what merely distracts you from discomfort. Often, we soothe ourselves not through healing, but through habits. A little more coffee to push through the fog. A sweet bite to soften the tension. A purchase to create a temporary spark. But over time, these comforts begin to cost us something deeper. And right now, with cosmic currents shifting and your emotional field more open than usual, your body is speaking more clearly than your thoughts. This is why tuning into your health is essential, not for the sake of perfection, but for the restoration of inner clarity. When you reduce stimulants like caffeine and processed sugars, you're not just calming your nervous system. You're allowing space for your intuition to rise without interference. Adding simple, grounding foods, like walnuts, avocado, and dark leafy greens, supports your adrenal balance, which is key to keeping your sense of center steady even when the world around you is uncertain. Breath is another gateway. A 5-minute box breathing practice in the morning. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4, may seem small, but its effects ripple far. It gently reminds your system that safety is not something you must earn from others, it's something you create within. When it comes to finances, this period invites you to get honest about your relationship with spending. Are you buying to expand or to escape? Are you investing in your growth, or in the hope of impressing someone who doesn't see you? You're encouraged to explore not only budgeting but energetic value. Sometimes, the most powerful purchase is not what you show to the world, but what supports your inner calm. Perhaps a crystal that helps absorb excess energy, a sound bath subscription, or simply choosing not to spend when what you truly need is stillness. In your relationships, you may feel an urge to prove your worth, to be more available, more pleasing, more tolerant. But love that exhausts you is not love. It's obligation disguised as connection. Real love doesn't require you to overextend. It allows you to exhale. If someone cannot offer you a space where your breath slows, where your presence feels enough without performance, then what you have may not be mutual. It may be emotional labor you've become too used to giving. This is where the deeper teaching enters. Choosing yourself does not mean choosing against others. It simply means refusing to abandon yourself to keep someone else comfortable. It is remembering that protection is not rejection, it is redirection toward your own wholeness. The colors surrounding you during this time, metallic purple, earthy orange, and creamy white, are not random. They reflect energy signatures your body is already drawn to: purple to calm and protect your crown space, orange to support creative grounding, and white to clear the energetic field. Let them guide you, dress you, surround you, without needing to explain why. You feel what you need long before you know it in words. And your numbers? 1, 9, 22, 33, 44. These are not just digits. They are vibrations. They speak of beginnings, completions, masterful choices, compassionate leadership, and angelic protection. When you see them, pause. They're not coincidences. They're confirmations that you are, even now, choosing rightly. This is not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming someone honest. And that kind of self-love, grounded, quiet, intentional, is the most unshakable power you'll ever know. When your light grows stronger, it will inevitably cast shadows, some around you, and some within. The path of choosing yourself is not always about adding more, doing more, or becoming someone new. Often, it's about releasing the things and people that quietly pull at your energy without ever truly returning it. You may not see their withdrawal as harmful at first. It may come as subtle sarcasm, a delayed response, a compliment that lands just a little too cold. But your body always knows before your mind does. A flutter in your chest, a twist in your gut, an unexplainable fatigue after being in their presence. These are signals. Not signs of weakness, but reminders that your system is always listening. In the days between May 24th and 26th, the moon's movement through Scorpio intensifies this sensitivity. You may find yourself more intuitive, more attuned to what isn't being said. Scorpio energy cuts through illusion. It doesn't care for surface niceties or social masks. It whispers truth to your instincts, often uncomfortably. It's why you might feel triggered more easily, or suddenly aware of energies that once slipped beneath your awareness. But awareness is not the burden, it is the gift. Because when you see clearly, you can finally choose clearly. Leo, you are ruled by the sun. You were never meant to blend in. You were never built for pretending. Your presence is meant to elevate, inspire, and sometimes, even without trying, intimidate those who aren't ready to see what they're not yet living. But that doesn't mean you should shrink. That doesn't mean your generosity should be mined by those who only take. To protect your light is an act of devotion, not just to yourself, but to the work you've done to become who you are. There is a form of love that no longer looks like approval seeking, but rather like intentional silence, sacred solitude, or gentle disengagement. You no longer owe explanations to people who make you feel like your feelings are too much. You owe yourself a life where you can be fully present without negotiating your worth in every room. Many teachings share that clarity arises when we are still enough to see what's truly moving through us. So pause. Breathe deeply. And notice what changes in your body when you say yes versus when you say no. Notice who leaves you feeling expansive and who leaves you tightening your jaw. There is no need to fight what feels misaligned. No need to prove anything to those who do not wish to see. Instead, protect your space. Keep objects around you that soothe and stabilize. Cleanse your environment not to chase away negativity, but to honor your peace. Let your home become a mirror of what you now value: simplicity, sincerity, sanctuary. If your heart still holds weight, grief, resentment, confusion, let it write. Write the letter you'll never send. Write as if your soul is reading. Thank the ones who hurt you for showing you what you will no longer tolerate. Then burn the words as a final offering. Not of forgiveness, but of freedom. Not everyone who walks beside your fire wants to be warmed by it. Some are only there to siphon what they cannot yet create. But you, Leo, are not here to be consumed. You are here to radiate. And radiance must be protected, not out of fear, but out of reverence for its rarity. So when you find yourself standing at the edge of a familiar pattern, overgiving, over-explaining, overlooking your own discomfort, step back. Choose again. You don't need to roar to reclaim your power. Sometimes, the softest boundary is the most unshakable one. This is not about isolation. It's about remembering that you are the guardian of your own energy. And when you guard it with clarity and care, everything else, joy, clarity, purpose, has the room to return. You don't need permission to shine. And you certainly don't need to apologize for no longer dimming to be loved. You are not here to be chosen by everyone. You are here to finally choose yourself. If you're still here, still listening, still holding space in your heart for every word we've shared, then I know something deep inside you has stirred. Not a reaction, not a fleeting emotion, but a recognition. A quiet, unwavering voice within you that's been waiting for you to pause long enough to finally hear it. That voice does not scream. It does not beg. It simply says, "It's time." You are not losing anyone. You are returning to yourself. And that return may look like silence, like distance, like saying no to the patterns that once felt familiar but now only feel heavy. It may look like walking away without burning bridges, without slamming doors, just walking away because your peace no longer lives there. It may feel uncertain at first, maybe even lonely, but in truth, it is the most sacred kind of homecoming. The kind where you don't need to earn anyone's permission to shine. The kind where you realize your light doesn't need to be understood to be valid. It only needs to be protected. You were never meant to beg for space inside someone else's story. You are here to write your own, boldly, brightly, without shrinking. So let me ask you, softly but truthfully, are you in a relationship, a friendship, a dynamic, any space at all, where you feel yourself growing smaller just to be accepted? Are you tolerating instead of choosing? Surviving instead of expanding? Forgiveness is beautiful, but only when it is rooted in clarity. Because forgiveness offered without change is just another form of self-sacrifice. You don't have to forgive someone who continues to hurt you just to feel spiritual, just to seem kind, just to keep things peaceful on the outside. Sometimes, the greatest act of peace is leaving. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away, not out of anger, but out of deep, unshakable respect for your own well-being. So today, I invite you to choose again. To rewrite the contract. To stand with the version of you that no longer needs to explain why something hurts or justify why you're not okay with it anymore. That version of you is not bitter. They're awake. They're brave. They're finally coming home. If this message has met you in a moment of truth, let it stay with you. Let it echo gently through your day and into your decisions. And if you're ready, truly ready, to reclaim the space within yourself that you've given away too many times, I invite you to write it into reality. In the comments below, declare it: I choose the light. I choose freedom. I choose myself. Thank you for walking this path with me. Thank you for letting these words touch something real inside you. If this video has reminded you of your strength, your worth, your power to choose differently, please take a moment to like, to share, to subscribe. Not just to support this channel, but to send this energy forward. Because sometimes, the only thing someone else needs, is to see you choose yourself. And that single choice? It might just light their way home, too.